Good morning and welcome to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington. Here we talk all things cloud, as you probably know if you've been on the channel before. And if you haven't, welcome, because I'm on a few more channels than I normally am. So right now we are streaming live on Facebook, on Twitch, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on Twitter. So broadening that reach, doing things slightly differently today. If you've tuned in, you've probably noticed different introductions, a countdown timer. So trying some new things, let me know. Of course, we got some background music going on. Hopefully it's not too loud, but do let me know how you feel with the sound, etc. Because I'll be monitoring the chat. So I also want to update on how things are changing from a Cloud with Chris perspective, because there's an elephant in the room here which we are going to address. I have been away from the channel for some time, so we'll be updating a little bit on that as well, and I guess a sign of what's to come with the channel. So first off, the weekly vlogs as they were, I'm going to be changing. They're going to be monthly updates instead. Weekly was just too much, to be quite honest, for me. I don't mean in terms of content being delivered to people, but for me it was just a little too much. So I need to kind of tone that down a little bit, so we're going to do monthly roundups instead. So I'll be covering things like Cloud with Chris, what's gone on. I'll be covering Azure updates, the Azure Blogs, the Azure DevOps blogs, the GitHub updates, and various other things as well that interest me from a project perspective. So really what I want to do is try and make this more community-led, community-driven. I do have a Discord server, which I'm working on publicizing a little bit more, so stay tuned for that. But ultimately, I'd love to know what you want to see, and that has always been the aim. I feel I can probably do a better job at that, so as always, please do let me know. But without further ado, we're going to be going ahead and jumping into a series of different content today. We're going to be going and looking at some of the updates from a Cloud with Chris perspective. We're going to be looking at, for example, the Azure updates, the Azure blogs, the Azure DevOps blogs, etc. And just pointing out things that are a bit of interest, exploring them. It's going to be quite relaxed and chilled out as a stream, so please do just chill out, have it on in the background if you're interested, or even, you know, come back to it later. Whatever works for you is absolutely great. So first things first is the elephant in the room that I would like to address, and that is, of course, the fact that I took some time away from the channel. So I am back. And I'm Back, Let's Talk is a blog post that I wrote in mid-December or so. And it's I am now back on medication as well. I went through counselling, a number of different bits and pieces because of my depression, because of my anxiety, the fact they were triggered, and unfortunately I didn't have the control around them that I wanted. For me, this time was different. The triggers for me and the signals for me were very different, and I was fortunate in a way that I had previously had some challenges with mental health, because I could identify those, I could see those, and it wasn't hard to identify that I wasn't right. What was still hard was admitting the fact that I wasn't right. That does not get easier. And kudos and big thanks to my team, my manager, Matt, as well, who has been awesome in terms of standing in for me while I was away, and so many other people in terms of friends and family who have been there to support. I'm coming out to this time a lot differently. I'm coming out realizing that these challenges that I have are not something that I get and then I kind of bounce back and I'm back to normal Chris again. It's the fact that actually this is who I am. It's something I live with and it is part of me, and I have to adjust to really be my best self. And I know that sounds cliche, I'm on a journey, blah, 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 but that's just part of it. So I'm really summarizing this blog post here. Apparently it's about an 18 to 20 minute read. Go and take a look at it if you're interested, because I talk all about all of my challenges with mental health that I've had, the triggers, the identifiers, how personally what helped me get better, and in terms of then the recovery process and just other insights that I've gained from my journey across these different pieces. So again, just to say, I'm back. You can't get rid of me that easily, and I'm really looking forward to being back. That does mean I'm going to be changing things. Obviously, the one I've mentioned already is the monthly vlogs instead of the weekly in terms of the tech updates. But the other one is going to be changing to the type of content that I'm doing as well, in the cadence and the rhythm. And I'll be honest, I'm still figuring some of that out, so I don't have all the updates here yet, but stay tuned, I will keep you all up to date on that. So without further ado then, let's jump into some of the blogs that I have released so far. And the first one is just a recap of 2021. It was quite interesting actually looking back, because 2021 was really the year that I went big with Cloud with Chris in terms of blog content, in terms of YouTube videos, in terms of events, etc. And it was really interesting looking back at some of the stats and what folks liked, what folks maybe didn't like as much. And interestingly, the posts which perform really well are the ones where they're very focused, very deep on a certain subject. So using GitHub self-hosted runners on Azure virtual machines with a system assigned managed identity is by far my highest performing blog post and continues to be. So that is a standout one. Securing app service with EasyAuth is always a popular one. API management policies, enforcing access restrictions. There's so many different ones there that are very deep. And similar trends across cloudwithchris.com, Dev2, and also from various channels, etc. as well, like YouTube, where maybe I've publicized some of that content over videos. So it was interesting actually that I found Cloud with Chris drove a lot more engagement and interaction than say Dev2 or some of the other platforms. So I'm still kind of deciding what to do about that, whether I just deprioritize Dev2 and not focus on it at all, or whether I invest a little in that to try and get that broader reach. If something works for you, I'd love to know, because that would just be a really interesting insight there. There were plenty of events that I attended last year, and I am looking for speaking slots at meetup groups as well. So if you have some slots, do reach out, give me a shout. But ranging from Cardiff to Nottingham, Glasgow to Limerick, Norway, the Global Azure conference as well. There were many different events that I spoke at because of the virtual world that we're in. So got a series of different topics that I can talk about. So again, if you've got something that you want to hear about from a dev perspective, feel free to reach out, because I probably have something that I can talk to you on. And of course, the podcasting and the video content was really the primary focus for me. The biggest one was around setting up Git LFS, which kind of surprised me because that's a very niche area. Following that was introduction to landing zones, then a Cloud Bytes session about PowerShell in Azure Functions, how Git works behind the scenes, and then my Cloud Gaming Notes, the first session on that. What is interesting is the smaller content seems to outperform the long form content. So again, that's something I'm going to be figuring out how I slot that into my scheduling and what I do with the channel as well. But overall, it's going to be a case of less is more. I'm really going to be focusing on the things that you care about as a community, the things I care about as well, and really drive the passion of me doing this giving back to the community. I'm going to be data oriented and looking at the things that really work well and deprioritizing the things that don't, and overall being kind. And that is really a being kind to myself. I'm someone who puts a lot of pressure on myself. I'm someone who feels like, I need to keep doing more. And for me, I need to get into that mindset of actually what I'm doing already is enough is great, and I'll keep giving back what I can, and that is my gift to you as a community. So those are the kind of principles that I'm going to be leading by, and hope that's just a bit of insight into what's to come over the next year. So then, in terms of blog posts, I started off on the first week, second week of Jan, I suppose, with a blog post on gaining insights into user behavior with Microsoft Clarity. Big shout out to Sam Rowe if you were listening in. Thank you for raising this in one of the calls we were on. Was not a tool that I was aware of, and actually provides some real great value. So if you have a website and you're interested in how users engage, a lot of times you think of Google Analytics, which is fine, is great. It's a well-established tool, well used in the industry, but it doesn't really allow you to see what's going on, how the user interacts with your page. So you may have noticed on Cloud with Chris, I'm a lot more obvious about I accept these cookies, or this is the level that I'm comfortable from a cookie accepting perspective, because I want to be really clear about the types of things that are being analyzed, tracked, etc. One of them is, of course, this Microsoft Clarity, which is GDPR compliant, which was nice. But of course, I, as the implementer of the website, have a duty to make sure there's an opt-in with GDPR. Hence, I'm being super, super explicit about that now with that banner. But you can see, for example, here, what I can see is actually how users interact with the page. What areas of content maybe they focus on a little bit more, the areas where they don't focus as much. Do they interact with these kind of call out boxes? Do they click on links? What is it, bullet pointed type stuff? How do you interact with that? Because then that will influence the type of content I write, how I actually build it, etc. And then that's also to do with things like heat maps. How far down in the page do you actually scroll? Do the majority of users do that or not? And there is actually integration with Google Analytics, so it's not a case of either or, which is great. And I was already using Google Analytics, so it allows me to bring those together. So I do a bit of a blog post around that, how it relates to GDPR, being able to mask things like sensitive data. Fortunately, there is no sensitive data on Cloud with Chris because it is just consumption, there's no logins, etc. But if you have a site where you require that, then of course, there's something great there for you to go and take a look at. It might be of value. And the best part is it's free. It's a free tool. So as a community content contributor, some great alliteration there, I don't have to do anything with that, which is in terms of payments, etc., which is awesome. So I'm really happy about that. And the other one, which has been really interesting to delve into, is the distributed application runtime, also known as Dapper. Now, Dapper is an open source project which was created by Microsoft, contributed to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and really the idea behind it is, wouldn't it be awesome if rather than using the SDK for Service Bus, the SDK for Google Cloud Storage, the SDK for Kafka, for example, instead I could just kind of plug and play these different components and swap them out by using some kind of sidecar. And that is the idea behind Dapper here. So I give a bit of a post around that. And again, a big shout out to friend and colleague Matt Fotunka, who we'll be talking about a little bit later in the show here. We had a great time learning all about Dapper and just experimenting and finding some of the edges around it and understanding how you might go and adopt this in projects. It's been really interesting. And I'm going to be carrying on building out this series, looking at how I go and use Dapper in an example of a producer and a consumer interacting with different queues, swapping those out, for example. I've got the samples already. I just need to write up the post. But then I'll also be moving on and talking about Azure Container Apps as well, which is a service I'm super excited for because you've got that scale to zero capability, serverless or rather event-driven pricing models as well. And because it's a container, you could go and use that in Kubernetes where you've hosted Dapper already. You could use it in Azure Container Apps or many different areas. So a really, really interesting service to be watching out for. So keep an eye on that one and do read the blog post if you're interested. So The next thing that I want to talk about here is around a project called Hugo Creator, which I've just established over this weekend. And Hugo Creator is really taking a lot of the great work that I've been doing with Cloud with Chris, packaging that up so that anyone who uses Hugo as a platform for hosting their blog could use the theme. That is the intent. There's a lot of work that I need to do to make it ready for that in terms of configuration options and not making it basically a cut and paste of Cloud with Chris and giving you some flexibility in that theme. And this has been really fun to do because I have been just thinking about how I scale this as an open source project, how I get things set up from a community perspective and doing everything right from the very beginning. So for example, this is public. You could absolutely go and check this out, github.com/cloudwithchris/Hugo-creator. And you can see here, it has all of my different pieces relating to the theme here. There is an example site, which I'll show you in a sec, but you can see the backlog is here as well. And I've adjusted the out-of-the-box labels that you get with GitHub as well to make a bit more sense for my project, to make a bit more sense in terms of scaling the community input to that as well. So if you can see yourself using this on your own blog, I'd love your input. I'd love you to start playing with this, bearing in mind this is still kind of pre-preview, pre-beta almost. So I'm absolutely making breaking changes and things right now, which I am going to have to refactor onto my own Cloud with Chris site. But it's for the greater good. It's for the open source community, the Hugo community. This is something I'm really excited and putting a bit of time in. So would love your thoughts. If you're interested, hit me up on Twitter, drop a message in the chat. Happy to carry on that further. But I'm using all the great things. We're absolutely doing pull request kind of driven development. We're going ahead and using project boards with GitHub. As well, this kind of new experience with the project's beta, figuring out what items need to be triaged, what's assigned to whom, and also the delivery plan perspective on what's expected in these different milestones. So it's all out in the open, it's all there. If you're interested, reach out because I can certainly use extra pair of hands if you're interested in getting this going. And one other piece is this. There is the example deployment here of the Hugo Creator theme at the subdomain hugo-creator.cloudwithchris.com. And you can see here, I've just taken some of my older content. Even though what you see is fairly similar to Cloud with Chris, there's been a lot of changes already on the back end in terms of how you get there and much more to come. For example, I've consolidated hosts and guests into people so that, I could go ahead and let's say, reference a person in a blog post, have multiple authors on a blog post, have multiple hosts, because there might be multiple hosts depending on the type of content you're creating. And this really is trying to be a theme which is for any type of content creator, not just kind of Cloud with Chris YouTube and podcasts and whatnot. If you're a Twitch streamer, if you have a Discord community, whatever it may be, I'm trying to build it so that it will be something for you. So again, please shout if you think this is of interest, because I'm going to be putting a bit of time into this as an open source project, and I'm quite excited. It's the first project I've worked on since I took that time off, where I've had that kind of passion outside of work to go and work on this. So excited on it. So again, drop me a message if you are interested. Okay, so then let's go ahead and just run through some of the Azure blogs here. We'd obviously, because of the amount of blog posts and updates and things that we're going to be running through, we're not going to go through every single update, but we're just going to potentially call out and dive into some of these a little bit more. So first off is that in June of last year, Microsoft and AT&T announced that there'll be a milestone, a first-time collaboration in the industry, that Microsoft Cloud Technology and the kind of AT&T 5G network workloads will be coming together. So there's just a bit of an update around the acquisition of that. So again, if you're in that telco space, you may be interested. I think we had Evo on the show a little while ago talking about that. So again, check that episode out if you're interested. But that might be of interest. Azure Cost Management and Billing, a year in review. So a bit of a summary of all of the different things that happened from Azure Cost Management. And then how Azure Cognitive Services is helping that kind of in-vehicle experience. So things like text-to-speech and speech-to-text, being able to interact with the car, and car manufacturers implementing that kind of technology is a really exciting space. Next up then, if we just scroll on down here. There we go. So what else have we got? We have got being able to accelerate your websites with Azure Static Web Apps and Enterprise Edge. Now, of course, you know that this is something I am passionate about, static web apps. It's how I host Cloud with Chris. It's how I'm going to be distributing, of course, the Hugo Creator theme as well. I'm currently running Netlify actually for that, just to get a bit of experience with another provider. And it was really great to see that now Enterprise Edge is in preview. So what that means is a turnkey way to be able to go just switch a flag, turn it on inside of a static web app, and now you've got access to Azure Front Door. Of course, you don't have the same level of control that you would have if you enabled Azure Front Door yourself, but it's a great way to be able to get some of those benefits like caching at the edge, for example, dynamic site acceleration, all of these kind of things. Now, me being me, of course, I thought, right, I want to try this out. I want to experiment with this. And I actually hit a bit of an issue, which I'm going to show on GitHub. Because the issue that I encountered is actually because of the fact I had an Azure Front Door instance provisioned already with my www.cloudwithchris.com endpoint. Personally, I don't think that's too extreme of an edge case. I think it's probably reasonable that people might be migrating from an Azure Front Door, an Azure CDN or something already to use that managed version of Azure Front Door within static web apps. But something wasn't working quite right. Did some debugging, did some triaging and figuring out the issue. And long story short, it's because of the fact there was an Azure Front Door instance with that domain name already configured, and it was silently failing in the background. So raised that as a GitHub issue. The product group have already acknowledged that. That's as expected behavior. But what I suggested was maybe we could be a bit more clear on the error messages. Maybe the enabled feature could be rolled back, and maybe there could be a clearer walkthrough in terms of migrating from A to B, which was acknowledged. So hopefully that's going to form part of the going forward plan there. But just wants to call that out in case you're experimenting with that feature, and in case you're looking to go forward with that as well, because personally it looks like a great feature, making it easier to adopt that within static web apps. Hey, I'm a fan of making things easier, right? So kudos to the team for that. Right, next up then, 5 reasons to attend the Azure Virtual Desktop Masterclass, which actually happened 5 days ago on January the 25th. But again, if you want to know why you should maybe watch that on demand, there's your 5 reasons. Go and check it out. Delivering the connected shopping experience, how Microsoft and Avanade are reimagining retail. So if you're in the retail space and focusing on IoT, that might be a blog post for you. What does open really mean to you? There was Azure Open Source Day, or rather it is coming up on February the 15th. So do tune in for that one coming up in a few weeks. Then also Elastic and Microsoft unified observability for Spring Boot applications. There's some great integration there now with Elastic and Spring Boot for you to go and check out. 7 reasons for you to attend Open Source Day, again coming up on the 15th of Feb. So if you want to know why you should, and of course there's a ton of work happening from Microsoft in the open source space, go and take a look. Right size to maximize your cloud investments with Microsoft Azure. Right sizing is so important because we're paying month on month, we're paying on demand and pay per use effectively. So getting that sizing right and not paying for more than what you need is really critical to controlling that governance and that cost. Azure DDoS protection. There's some interesting trends actually in the 2021 Q3 and Q4, including some of the largest DDoS attacks being mitigated known to record. Interesting trends on what's happening where, the types of attacks. So if you're interested, go and take a look. You can save big on your on-premises licenses on Azure with hybrid benefits, and there's a blog post on that. And then finally, Microsoft launches the landing zone accelerator for Azure Arc-enabled servers. So if you're interested in that hybrid kind of story, how you go and manage that at scale and what kind of foundations you need in place to manage that at scale, there's a landing zone accelerator that has you covered there. And that is the set of blog posts from Azure this week, or this month, I should say. In terms of the Azure updates, there are quite a few. So let's go ahead and rattle through those here. But first, of course, taking a quick drink. Okay, so generally available. The fact you can now display a limit on tiles or rather display limits on tiles has increased to 100 homogeneous devices, and that is in IoT Central. Data mapping for transforming data ingress in Azure IoT Central. Support for copying dashboards. Couple here which seem to have repeated. So let me just jump up here. Public preview updates for early January 2022 for Azure Sql. Let's go have a quick glance at what those are. Enable transparent cross-region failure of Azure Sql hyperscale databases using auto failover groups. Semantic search updates for Azure Cognitive Search. That is interesting, actually. A slight nuanced change to how searching can work. So go ahead, take a look at that. Azure Traffic Manager, additional IP addresses for endpoint monitoring service. So you might need to go and update some rules there, I suspect. Azure Policy support for Azure Site Recovery. So you can now go and manage your Azure Policy and Site Recovery for VMs at scale with organizational standards, which is nice. There's a roundup of the key updates for Azure Backup from 2021. Ultradisk storage is now available in WestUS 3, and that is useful for workloads like SAP HANA, for example. The load balancer SKU, there's an upgrade available through a PowerShell script. So when you think about the standard or basic to standard, there's now a PowerShell script that can help you migrate from A to B. Multiple custom BGP API-PA addresses for active VPN gateways. Not a networking guy, so those are just all acronyms to me. Azure Static Web Apps Enterprise Grade Edge, we've already talked about. Awesome update. Happy to see that. Price reductions for Azure Confidential Computing, which is very interesting. I think more and more people are going to keep looking at those types of services and the kind of world of security that keeps unfolding. Azure Sphere OS version 22.01 expected on Jan 26th, so it was expected 4 days ago. Azure IoT Edge tools for Visual Studio Extension now supports Visual Studio 2022. So if you use the Azure IoT Edge tools extension, you can now install it in Visual Studio 2022. Now in GA, Azure Database for PostgreSQL Hyperscale is available in Central India and East Asia regions, and then there's some new certifications available as well from a compliance perspective. There's a Kubernetes version alias support in AKS. You no longer need to specify the exact Kubernetes patch version, and there are now aliases supported for that. And there's now support for several new upgrade events with AKS, so I suspect that is relating to Event Grid as well. And now there is Containerd support generally available for Windows containers. So good news there if you are running container workloads on AKS. That update is for AKS specifically. Next up, Ultradisk support on AKS is now generally available. So again, if you've got a data-intensive workload, you might want to look at Ultradisks depending on the requirements, the I/O, the throughput, etc. of that workload. So do be aware of that and do take a look at that. Generally available, FIPS-enabled node pools. So again, if you've got those compliance requirements for FIPS-enabled node pools, great news, that is now GA. A new and improved alert rule creation experience is now in GA, so I believe that's the kind of alerts which are part of Azure Monitor there. And you also get 1 minute frequency log alerts as well, so they can be evaluated every minute. So if you've got a super critical workload where you have that kind of requirement, that capability is now available. You can create multiple data export rules to the same Event Hub namespace. That is in preview. So when you export data to Event Hub, you now have the flexibility to create multiple rules and Event Hub names to the same Event Hub namespace. Several updates relating to Azure Machine Learning in general availability, including multiple private endpoints for workspaces and support for storage account IP file. Updates for Azure Sql in GA. That includes backup storage redundancy change options for Azure Sql Managed Instance. And then we've got scheduled query rules API preview version 2021-0201 will be retired on the 31st of January 2022. So that is tomorrow. So if you are using that API version, it's going to be retired tomorrow. So be aware of that. Update your ARM templates, your bicep templates, etc. and any SDKs that might depend on that version as well. Managed identity support in Azure Cache for Redis, being able to connect Azure Cache for Redis to storage accounts via managed identity, pretty cool there. Generally available, Azure Site Recovery support for ZRS managed disks. Generally available, Kibana dashboards and visualizations on top of Azure Data Explorer. There are new enhancements released for the security of hybrid backups to enable you to integrate with MUA, protect against accidental deletion, and avoid data loss in soft delete state. That is relating to Azure Backup releases for hybrid backups. Support for private links are available on the new Azure Monitor agent, so go ahead and check that out. That is in preview. Azure Netapp Files has some new features, including dual protocol, ADDS, LDAP over TLS, and SMB3 protocol are all generally available. Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server is now GA in 2 new regions, China East 2 and China North 2. And in public preview with Netapp Files, we have capabilities apparently to enhance your experience using Netapp Files. So let's go and dive into those, see what they are. So you have single file snapshot restore, NFS protocol version conversion, and then feature regional coverage continues to expand as well for standard network features in South Central US and West US 3. What else have we got going on here? We have got multitasking in the cost analysis preview. So a tabbed experience to streamline your analysis into to drill into costs. That's excellent. We've also got a public preview of the Azure Percept developer kit for January 2022-01. Azure Key Vault has increased its service limits for all customers, which is excellent. And of course, then finally, generally available, new Azure Maps features historical weather, air quality, and tropical storm features. So very interesting updates there if you are using that kind of Azure Maps satellite type information. So there we go. Those are the Azure updates done. So what do you think? Are there any updates in particular that were noteworthy, that stood out to you? Anything of interest? Drop a message in chat, drop a message on Twitter as well. Would love to know what you are thinking. Next up then, the Azure DevOps blog. So we're going to do a bit of a recap here. Jay Gordon released another episode of Azure Fun Bites with Steve Morawski, and they talk all about getting started with Azure and WebAssembly. I think WebAssembly is a really interesting type of technology right now, especially when you combine it with cloud native and that portability kind of aspect. So really, really interesting. Top stories from the Microsoft DevOps community. Cover posts like AZ modules, pipelines, Azure API management, repository branching, Packer, and AKS. Another Azure Fun Bites episode from Jay Gordon, this time building SOC efficiency with Azure Sentinel, which is, of course, the kind of tool or service from a SIAM perspective, security and event management from Azure. There was another Microsoft DevOps community roundup focusing on Power Platform, Python, Azure DevOps pipelines, Terraform, and more. There is a post from Sylview all about upgrading your pipelines from Azure DevOps Server 2019 to Server 2020 without losing builds, for example. Jay released another Azure Fun Bites episode, this time with Laurent Bourguignon, talking all about Azure durable functions for automation. So thinking about things like activity monitoring, synchronization, and runtime concerns. Interesting post there. Recommend checking that one out. Big fan of durable functions, and that almost acts as like capability there. Next up, another Microsoft DevOps community update, including posts on Octopus. So a shout out, of course, to Sarah Lean there and Derek. What else do we have? GitHub Actions, Inner Source, Terraform, and more. We have another Fun Bites episode from Azure, or rather about Azure Sql, building real-time apps from Chris Noring. There was an update in terms of Azure DevOps Server and TFS patches there. So I believe, that came out late January, so only a few days ago. And then finally, another DevOps community update, and this one covered a few different pieces. CI/CD build pipeline for .NET solutions using Cake 2, pipeline examples to deploy your .NET applications with Azure DevOps, releases, badges, dashboard on Azure DevOps, integrate Azure DevOps with Azure Synapse Studio is quite an interesting one for you data folk out there. Azure Container Instance, deploying that from Azure Container Registry using CI/CD, Azure DevOps Pipeline, and Terraform from our good friend, Thomas Thornton. Build and deploy an Uno application for iOS, Android, UWP, and WASM from Azure DevOps and Pipeline templates. Automate a pipeline migration from Synapse to a Synapse workspace, using Azure DevOps. Securely populating Azure Key Vault via Azure DevOps, and finally, using Azure DevOps pipeline with a Go paddle for no-code Kubernetes deployments. And there are some shout-outs there to the Azure Open Source Day coming out once again on February the 15th. Do go ahead, check that one out, put that in your diaries. And now, on to GitHub. But I'll be honest, I was a bit shocked when I saw the GitHub page because I haven't looked at the blog in quite a while. And it's changed quite a lot. It looks a bit more like the front page of a news magazine or a newspaper or something like that. It's pretty cool. Makes it a little challenging for us from what are the latest updates. But, we can go through and see here the community updates, the policy updates, the education side, products, engineering, etc. So you can get a bit of a flavor. So, securing your GitHub account with GitHub Mobile 2 FA, a blog post on that. Highlights from Git 2.35, release radar update, open source, how do you measure the value of that, how they ship GitHub Mobile every week, for example, the availability reports from December, what else have we got, technical interviews via Code Spaces, I think we covered that in the past, which was a really interesting post, what's on the release radar for December, etc., and then the trending stories. It's really interesting. I'm going to have to get used to this, so I don't have a huge update on what has been released from a blog perspective so far, but fully encourage you to go and check that out. It's pretty cool in terms of the different content and the way they're kind of exposing you to that, I suppose, there. So really interesting. Go ahead, check out that one. And then, one thing I did notice, actually, let me go back to that previous page. I had never really paid attention to this before, and I think it's been around for some time. It was just one of those great jewels that was buried away. So this one I would suggest go ahead and take a look, is the GitHub changelog. So this is available on this kind of banner at the very top right here, changelog. And you'll see that this is a bit like the Azure Updates page. All of these new feature updates from a GitHub perspective. So from GitHub Actions, you can change the search order for self-hosted runners. For GitHub Enterprise Cloud, enterprise owners are now viewable at the organization level. Jupyter notebooks and specialized file formats display faster. You can now have, or rather, there's a new assignment page for GitHub Classroom. Sorry, words. Codespaces now offers organizational policies to restrict the machine types. Great news for you, enterprise owners and organization owners who are interested in restricting the types of code spaces that can be used for a kind of cost perspective. GitHub Actions jobs running on Windows latest and now running on Windows Server 2022. Git.io no longer accepts new URLs. Security-focused improvements for NPM. Unwatch all repositories owned by a given user or organization. So if you've been, let's say, happy in terms of hitting watch on different repositories, now you're getting that storm of notifications. It's great. You've got a way to be able to unwatch those easily. Shortcuts on GitHub mobile app. The new GitHub issues, an update from January. An update on OIDC-based deployments to AWS. I do need to check that out from an Azure perspective, because I think that's a really interesting update for a passwordless way of interacting with those cloud providers. Updates to the checks data retention policy. GitHub Actions prevent GitHub Actions from approving pull requests. That is interesting. I might need to go and check that one out. View code scanning alerts across an organization. GitHub's SSH host keys are now published in the API. Secret scanning enterprise level REST API. Audit log streaming is generally available. Additional fields when exporting user details. Share GitHub Actions within your enterprise. Great for scaling those GitHub Actions across different organizations. If you are a GitHub Enterprise customer, of course. Allow to upload .svg files to Markdown. GitHub Actions reusable workflows can be referenced locally. And finally, discussions, community insights, and being able to get insights into those discussions and GitHub discussions, really. There is an RSS feed, so I'll probably add that to my automation and track that as another feed and start tweeting about those as well. I am conscious I haven't been approving a few of those this month, so I need to go back and check on those. So there we go. In terms of what is coming up, a few new things. Of course, we've got this update from what's going on with the January update, the monthly update. So you've seen that. That is this. So that is checked off the list. On Wednesday, I've got some community gaming. So I believe I'm going to be joined by 3 others. It's Matt, it's Dean, and I think John, if I remember rightly. I believe, in terms of community gaming, and that's again another change. Going to be doing a monthly tech roundup, but also going to be doing a monthly gaming session, and the game will change each month. So this month is going to be Halo Infinite. I think next month it's going to be Among Us, and the month after it's going to be Sea of Thieves. So again, if you're interested, I will shortly, within the next week or so, post the Discord links broadly. So keep an eye on my Twitter if you are interested. But then next Tuesday, so the February the 8th, is a new series that I'm running called Tulip Tuesday. And I'll be joined by my good friend, good colleague, Matthew Fatonka. And we're going to be talking, well, not even talking, actually. I'm setting that up on there. We're going to be establishing this new series. It's going to be around once a month. The intent is it'll be an hour and a half, but we'll see how it goes on the first one. We'll evolve it over time. And the idea is we're going to build something. That's something, we've got some ideas, what we think we might build. We're still fleshing that out. But other than having the repository set up and maybe some of the underlying admin pieces done, we're not going to be preparing anything. We're not going to be pre-planning anything. We're going to be talking live through some of those decisions that we typically make within a project. We're going to be talking live about, do we use this technology or this service or this approach? Do we implement it in this way? Because that is something for content-wise, I wanted to make for quite some time. Matt and I were just doing some learning recently and bouncing ideas off each other, and it struck us that actually this is a great piece of content that typically you see the polished end project, I suppose, rather than the kind of process of going through and learning that. Big fan of learning. I'm a big fan of giving back to the community. So why don't we learn in the open and showcase our thought process there? So that's going to be exciting. Fully expect things are going to go wrong, of course, but yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So check that out on Tuesday. So the cadence for things, these monthly updates are going to be the last Sunday of each month. The gaming session is going to be the first Wednesday of each month. And then the Tulip Tuesday is going to be the second Tuesday of each month. What I will say as well, and this is not a Cloud with Chris update, but I guess my Microsoft hat and my Microsoft persona on, stay tuned for my socials soon as well, because I've got an exciting update of something else I'm working on. So stay tuned for that. You might be interested as well. But that, in a nutshell, is the update for January. So feedback is always incredibly welcome. If you've been watching on one of these channels, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, let me know. Of course, this will be available on demand on YouTube as well. This will be available on demand on Spotify, audio only, of course. But would love to know your feedback. Do you like the format? How can I make it more engaging? How can I bring folks in? Because that's something I want to do more of as well, is get insights from the broader community on cloud. So maybe we have slots where folks drop in and give some updates, or maybe we go ahead and have a bit of some interviewing type discussions. You know, what was the most interesting updates of the month? All up in the air. Haven't got ideas. That's where I rely on you on the community, and where part of that theme that I mentioned I'm building earlier, I want to bake in things like updates, upvoting, polls, etc. So need to work on that. Got some implementation ideas, so do shout, do let me know. Otherwise, folks, great to be back. I will be figuring out how to get some of that more episodic content out as well soon. Not quite sure on the cadence or what or how yet, but to set expectations, it is going to be more developer focused. That is my passion, that is my background, that is my area. So cloud native, developer, PaaS, static web apps, all of that good stuff. .NET Go maybe, because Go is something I've wanted to learn for a while in some depth, because of some of these great open source projects that go and actually build upon it. So figuring it all out. We'll see where this goes, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're along for the journey. And as always, really appreciate the support. So once again, if you've liked what you've seen today and what you've heard, please do share the live stream links, share the links to the various socials, the various pages that you've been tuning into. And of course, make sure that you have liked and subscribed, because last I checked, a large number of you who consume my content aren't. So always appreciate that. And in terms of the content, feedback is appreciated. This is a new format, going to try new things out and experiment, and making my life easier in terms of delivering this to you. So with that, folks, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for tuning in. And until next month's update, or of course the community gaming slot, or maybe Tulip Tuesday, thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.